Okay, I got a story about Al, which he told me a couple of times about when he was a student at Willamette University. It seemed like it was very early, maybe even before classes started as a freshman, when the famous clock on the Willamette campus was covered by what do they call the things that you put up when you're painting?
Scaffolding.
Scaffolding, thank you. And so he decided to climb to the top of the building. And he climbed up the scaffolding, and this was not to be done. I think they had signs up saying, stay off. But Al was a risk taker, and so he decided to get up to the top. And the police were called. And the police said, come on down, and eventually he came down, and they decided to bring him to jail. This was not an auspicious start to his higher education, but there was somebody who cared for him there, and who thought he had potential, and so the dean of students came and said, I take responsibility for this fellow, and he'll be okay, let me do it. And so the police said, okay, but just make sure you keep him out of trouble. That dean of students was Mark Hatfield, who became senator from Oregon, and probably as famous politician as we've had, along with Tom McCall, one that many have named things after. And who knows how Al would have turned out if Mark hadn't got him out of trouble. Anyway, I think of Al in several ways. I think of him as a model for the rest of us. We've talked about how he tried to live his life in a way that was consistent with the principles he taught. I think of him as authority. He knew his subject backwards, forwards, in ways that are far stronger than the other people I think who tried to write in this field. He was a friend. He was a Blazer fan. Well, once a year we would go to a Blazer game together and have dinner, and always enjoyed that. And he was a star. I met him in 1979 when I was coordinating the Oregon Fire Chiefs Conference. And he was the keynote speaker for the second time. Now, this doesn't happen very often. When you do a conference, you always get a new keynote speaker. And they wanted him back because he spoke to the challenges of being in the fire service better than anybody they'd ever heard. And so they wanted him back second year, the third year. It was sometimes a very similar message that they wanted to continue hearing. So I got to know him a little bit then, but later I ended up hiring him to do some different workshops, and then to be the keynote speaker at one of our first Cascade Employers Association conferences, which was my conference, the one I planned, and my employer for the last 15 years. And he got the highest ratings. And so we invited him back the next year to do a session at other times, and everybody said, I can't compete with Al. That's not fair, because all the people went to Al's session and nobody went to the other session, so it really wasn't fair. He had an easygoing style. He didn't get too fancy. He got a little fancier with his PowerPoints later on, but he used to just scribble some things down on an overhead, and yet people were totally fascinated because he had the authority, the charisma, without the hype. It was real, it was deep, and it was genuine. When I was in charge of training for the state of Oregon, came in and did a whole series of workshops on thriving on change and surviving the layoffs and different things like that. And people who thought they were going to lose their jobs came to his workshops and always came away upbeat and enthusiastic and recommending him. And every one of his workshops filled up with a maximum of 30 that we allowed to attend. And so he was extremely popular with people in state government, which is not an easy audience, so that was impressive. I love the way he writes. Just fascinating stories, clear messages, flow to it. I don't like reading nonfiction books a whole lot. I read them because there's some good content I want to learn, but his are a pleasure to read. He was the only professor, the only professional invited by the 9/11 survivors to their reunions. And they trusted him, And they thought he taught them a lot, including how to tell their story, because fascinatingly enough, a lot of people couldn't handle their story. A lot of people found it stressful to listen to it, and so he had to help them think, this is why people react the way they do. Here's how you can help it work for them as well as for yourself. So I thought that was a great service to provide. Al was a great participant in the men's group. I loved his parties. I loved just spending time with him. He was a fascinating friend. And I don't think he was a star outside of Oregon until late into his later years, when his books really took off, and the federal government discovered him, and some of the major accounting firms and would have him come in and do major trainings for sometimes hundreds of people. But he loved it. He loved being the star. It was like, finally, the work isn't a small contribution, it was a big contribution. It was national and international in scope. In fact, one of the groups that he repeatedly trained were managers from Botswana, a small country in the South Africa area, that wanted to continue to pass that message on and make it part of their culture, of their government.
Don't forget Oprah.
Yeah, that's right. Al was on Oprah. She did a session one time on survivors, invited a number of survivors to speak, and then turned to Al and said, tell us about that. Make sense of this. Explain what's going on here. So that was great to see him get some national recognition that way.
And when he was on TV, he was interviewed by Brian Gumbel.
Yeah, the Today Show.
Oh, I forgot about that.
He was on the Today Show.
Yeah.